Three true values. That means it's a mailbag episode every other week. We answer your questions, whatever is on your mind across the sport of college basketball. We will address it here. So, on today's show, as we go through some of the things that haven't necessarily been answered, whether it's over the course of the show, in my writing, or just things that you want more in-depth details on, we've got a couple that have come up in the last few days. The first one is Oklahoma on the bubble, but how have they survived this long losing streak in the SEC? The poor results basically since the turn of the calendar. How are they still in the field on the right side of things as we stand right here today on Tuesday morning? Now, I specify that clearly because by the time my next bracketology update releases on Thursday morning, they very well could be on the wrong side of the bubble. We will discuss why they have been able to sustain to this point and what could drag them below that line, as well as a little bit of what it could mean for that program moving forward. After that, we will talk about Memphis. They take a loss against Wichita State in overtime, a quad 3 loss, and here's why that's important. Memphis already had 2 quad 3 losses on their resume. The only other team in the projected field as of today with 2 losses against quad 3 opponents is UConn. And UConn has been in a little bit of a free fall. Memphis now has 3. No one, including the field and the wrong side of the bubble, has 3 quad 3 losses other than Memphis. We will discuss their resume, how much it was damaged, what the ceiling is for this Memphis team, and whether they need to abandon the AAC for another conference. I believe that's going to get us plenty to talk about here in this 20-ish minutes that we will spend. So we're going to keep it to 2 topics this week. But if you have more questions, please submit them. Try to work them either into Thursday's show or get to them the next time we do one of these. Of course, if you tweet your question to me, as long as it is something that is an easy to answer in a few characters, I will respond there as well. If you have a little bit more pressing, maybe it's not something that requires a segment on the podcast, but a question you want to know. Happy to answer any of those along the way. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Oklahoma, because Oklahoma was one of the last unbeaten teams in college basketball this season. They made a spectacular run through the non-conference schedule, entered SEC play as a top 25 type of team, as a team that looked like the darling of college basketball, the team under Porter Moser that had been kind of thrown together. Looked like all the pieces were meshing. You had Jeremiah Fears, an early enrollee as a freshman who was tearing up college basketball. And then they met an SEC schedule, and they have not responded particularly well. They have had immense struggles to string together wins. They have gone on long losing streaks. They have won close. They have lost close. They have lost in blowouts. It has been a real mixed bag for Oklahoma to this point. They are now near the bottom of the SEC standings. Of course, South Carolina still way at the back in 16th, but it is Oklahoma and LSU down there trying not to be 15th in the conference. Why is that important? Well, a number of reasons. Obviously, you can't just lose all your games and expect to make the NCAA tournament. But even as the SEC is projected to have an unprecedented year, right now, most projections have 13 SEC teams, which is 2 more than the all-time record. So even with two more opportunities than the most in college basketball history, 13 leaves a cutoff with three teams out. So if you got South Carolina, I just mentioned they're battling with LSU for 14th. That's not high enough. Now they have the non conference resume. But how strong is their non conference slate? Well, it's not a bad resume by any means. The problem is they are just accumulating so many losses now that the current form is something that has to be taken into consideration. Jeremiah Fears does not look like the player that he looks like in non conference play. He has struggled time and time again to be efficient, to put up consistent numbers. Because here's the thing, and this goes into a little bit of draft eval with Jeremiah Fears that has him well further down my board than a lot that I see, is a lot of his stats, unfortunately, come at the end of games. And that's a problem when your team, particularly, is losing by the amount that they are. Because I don't care if you had 15 points if 10 of them were when the other team switched off defensively or had walk-ons in the game. So the 1-for-6 starts, the 1-for-5 starts that have become far too common for him in these SEC games are hurting Oklahoma. And look, here's the thing. He's an early enrollee freshman. Growing pains should be expected. Unfortunately for him, unfortunately for Oklahoma, for Porter Moser, for the fans, it's kind of on his back. He is expected to be kind of the go-to guy on this Oklahoma team. And so as he tries to fight through these growing pains, they don't have the ability to overcome them. Jalen Moore has played well. Duke Miles, another guy, playing well. But the standard is just so high. Even these teams that are at the bottom of the SEC, LSU has a very good roster. Look, another team that mowed through most of the non-conference schedule. South Carolina even had a very good start to non-conference play. They have a potential top 10 draft pick who runs the offense for them. And it's still not enough to win games in the SEC. So for Oklahoma, you are sliding. And each loss compounds. So over this last few weeks of the season, Oklahoma desperately, even if they cannot win out, because I don't think they have to win out, but they need at least one big win, which you're in the SEC. You've got plenty of opportunities to pick up. You pick up that big win, perhaps tonight against Florida, whatever it is. Now you've got things, you're back on the right side. You've got that tiny little bit of breathing room. The rest of the way, do not let momentum swing. So if you take a loss, you've got to bounce back with a win. That's going to be kind of the bar for this Oklahoma team moving forward. You look at the computer numbers, they continue to go the wrong direction. Wins above bubble, that's kind of the one that's keeping them in this, I think, more than the rest. But that starting point, that advantage that they had, the start of non-conference play, it has completely fallen apart. They are very close to being on the wrong side of the bubble, which would mean that Porter Moser misses the NCAA tournament again. And at that point, you've got to wonder, will they go the way of LSU, the way that Indiana went last year, and back him with big NIL funds for next season? Or do they take a look at the coaching market, see who is available? Now, another team that is going the wrong way in bracketology, but in a little bit different manner. Memphis took a loss over the weekend to Wichita State. It is their third quad three loss. As I said earlier, UConn, the only team above them with two quadrant three losses. So Memphis, who accumulated one of the best non-conference resumes in college basketball, it was basically Auburn's and theirs in terms of challenging yourself and achieving success. The difference was that Auburn was going to continue to play that level of schedule throughout the rest of the year. Memphis, on the other hand, was going to go play in the AAC. The AAC, which has North Texas, who has been better, I think, than a lot anticipated. Their net ranking is good enough to be a positive value if you beat them. UAB is a decent team. It has probably net neutral value if you beat them. Other than that, though, you can only get hurt playing in the AAC. I mean, it is a landmine for Memphis. This Memphis team, which is still good, they're still talented. You have people as recently as last week discussing them as one of the sleeper teams to go on a Final Four run. And I don't think that should be completely dismissed. I think they're still that team. Unfortunately, 2-3 times throughout the course of a 30-game season, they just didn't have it. And while you can harp on that if you want, I'm not sure how much you really can. There's a debate going on about how badly they need to exit the AAC. And this could be a sort of tipping point for that. Because in the past, we have seen Memphis kind of be high and low and high and low, and then they end up on the bubble. They make a run late, pick up some good wins. Oh, now they're in the 8-9 game. That's happened a couple times now in the Penny Hardaway era. We've seen it go too far where they missed the tournament. All kinds of different combinations here. But for Memphis, this season, they've done nothing wrong. They slipped up against Arkansas State. There's only a handful of teams, if you look across the country, who have not slipped up in one game that they should have won. So what does that do? That loss to Arkansas State. Okay, it probably rules you out from a 1 seed, a 2 seed, maybe even a 3 seed. Well, then you lose a game against Temple. All right. You're definitely out of the running for a 3 seed. You can't have 2 bad losses on your schedule like that. But they're still in the mix for a 4 seed, except that all the teams around them keep picking up big wins. Memphis's record matches up with anyone. Memphis's record against good quality competition matches up with everyone. Remember, they've only got a handful of losses, and I just said 3 of them have been just slip-ups along the way. They performed extremely well against teams that are at the top of college basketball. But there's 2 factors here. One is every team slips up somewhere along the way. Even Auburn. Auburn takes a loss. Now, was Auburn's a quad 3 loss? No. Was it a game that they were definitely expected to win? Yes. They were at home. Number 1 team in the country. A wide gap between them and the field. And they dropped a game. Your focus lets up throughout the season, and it lets up more when you feel like you are far and away above your competition. And that's what Memphis has to do night after night after night for 3 straight months. And they can't slip up, because when they do slip up, Now you see it. They lose to Wichita State. That was a good game. Look, they got horrible performances from some of their best players, and they still managed to send that game to overtime and really probably should have won, if not for some just hero ball at the end. But now that it's a loss, they fall from being not a 4 seed, because the committee told us on Saturday they weren't a 4 seed, but either a 5 seed or a 6 seed. They now fall into the conversation as either a low 7 or a high 8 seed. That big jump down there. Well, now what? If they lose one more game between now and Selection Sunday, that includes the regular season and the conference tournament. They lose one more game, they will drop into the 8-9 game for sure. So your margin of error has just completely vanished. Penny Hardaway has been very vocal that the 8-9 game is what they want to avoid. They don't want to continue to appear in the NCAA tournament in the 8-9 game. But that's where they're going to land again if they lose one time the rest of the way. If they lose 2 more times, now we're having a bubble conversation. 3 more, and they're probably out of the field. Now, 3 more is unreasonable. It should not collapse that way. 2 more, it gives you very little margin because, look, conference tournaments are conference tournaments. Sometimes crazy stuff happens. You're playing 3-4 days in a row. So you never can fully be confident in what's going to happen there. But if you're Memphis, there's no moving up the board. They peaked in early January. They were not going to move up a seed line no matter the results of their games. Because even if a team ahead of them lost, a team behind them was going to pick up a better win than what they had left on their resume. So if you're Memphis, this isn't about winning the conference tournament, proving that you're the upper echelon of the AAC, none of that. The point is, Memphis is a better basketball team than Georgia, than Vanderbilt, than Arkansas. But those teams get a full season to build their resume. Memphis is trying to build a resume during half the season and then just hold on for dear life. It's not conducive for playing your best basketball. It's not conducive for positive results. They've got to get it fixed, whether that means Rick Pitino's idea of an Big East expansion, whether that's ACC expansion, an invite from the Pac-12, whatever that means. Memphis has to get their basketball program out of the AAC. There's just no other way around it. When we come back on Thursday, we will talk about all kinds of things. Matt McMahon at LSU got a vote of confidence. We'll have more results to talk about right here on 3 True Values. Thank you for tuning in.